Hello, magical experimenters. This is Taylor Ellwood here, and today we're talking about there we go. We're talking about how to apply awareness to spirit work. So, this little series that I've been doing, I've been exploring this concept of awareness, and I thought, it'd be interesting to look at it in relationship to spirit work because, we're not just looking at relationships with ourselves or relationship with other people or the magical work that we're doing. We're also looking at it in relationship to the spirits, and the spirits that we connect with and work with, and not just spirits that we summon and call up, but the spirits that we interact with every day in ways we don't even know. Um, my own stance on spirits is that really the spirits are around us all the time. We might do like a formal invocation or evocation work, but really the spirits are part of this reality. A lot of times I think people categorize spirits and separate them out and say, oh, they're on different planes of existence. And part of that really has come about because of fantasy books. When you look at this language around spirits, we really don't see this concept of spirits being from another plane of existence until we start seeing fantasy books being published. At least that's what I would argue I've seen in relationship to this. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that, because if we look at older literature, before fantasy books really started to get published, for the most part, what we saw was that, spirits were part of the world around us. I mean, you look at, well, we'll look at, for example, Rudyard Kipling. He's written a couple of interesting, fiction books on fairies and stuff. He doesn't separate out the spirits as being part of another plane of existence. They're all around us. They're part of us. So I think it's really worthwhile to remember that when we look at spirit work in general, and we look at how we apply awareness to spirit work. So if you're just joining this, feel free, and you've never been on here before, go ahead and subscribe and like this video and click the notification bell. And if you're a frequent flyer, feel free to leave a comment, ask a question, share your thoughts on this topic around spirit work. So when we apply awareness to our work with spirits, I think one of the most important things we need to do is we need to apply this awareness to the idea that the spirits really do exist around us all the time. I mean, they are a part of our lives. They are part of our experience. I think, for example, this house is a spirit in its own right. It'll probably go on existing after I'm dead. Someone else will end up living here at some point. Maybe not. I have no idea what will happen with this house once I'm out of the picture, but let's just assume, for the sake of argument, that at some point I sell this house or whatever else. The spirit of the house will continue on, and it'll contain my experiences and memories here as part of its life. But it also has all the experiences and memories of other people that have lived here. There have been people who lived here before me. I don't necessarily know all the history of it. I do have a picture of the house, though, from the 1949, and there's this little kid on the thing, and I kind of wonder, like, who owned this house? What were some of the things? And part of that, I think, is just kind of like a recognition of the history, but part of it is also acknowledging the life of this house. This house has been around since 1949. That's how long it's existed. It has a life of its own. It's a spirit. Now, we don't necessarily think of houses or other things as spirits, but they are. And part of what brings them the interaction, or part of what makes them spirits, is the interaction we have in these spaces that we come to call our homes. So for me, this is a space that I've come to call my home, and it is very much a spirit. But then I apply this concept of spirits to, for example, the land I live on. I've got the grass. I've got plants and trees and flowers and all these other things. And these things are also part of the life that exists here. They exist. They And they are spirits made flesh, but they are spirits. I think of animals and plants as being spirits made flesh. I think that's an important distinction to make. So when we apply awareness, we start to really examine and question, first of all, what is our notion of the spirit world? What kinds of spirits exist and where? Do the spirits, you know, do the spirits only exist in our minds? Are they immaterial or are they real? Um, we have this kind of interaction with them, and it's very potent and powerful and real. And I think that it's worthwhile to remember. So I look at it and I think about the spirits and how we interact with them, and I think that we want to apply awareness. What kind of relationship do we want to have with the spirits? And so I would argue too that then we look at like angels or demons or other types of or elemental spirits and all that, and I would argue that they do exist alongside us. We may not be aware of them, and they may not particularly be aware of us. They may not really care about us, and this may be the reason why we quote unquote have to do invocations and evocations where we call to the spirits. Nonetheless, they are part of this continuum of existence that we live in, and they have interaction with us on some level or form. We may not always be aware of it, and again, they may not always be aware of us. But that doesn't mean that they're not real, and it doesn't mean that we don't have interaction with them. So I think it's really important to recognize that the spirits that we interact with are not, they're not they're not invisible, I guess is what I would say. They are real, they have presence, and they are part of our lives. And a lot of times, we don't necessarily acknowledge them because it just kind of we kind of think, oh, they got to be in other planes of existence. But I think that if we really look at the literature around that, we'll see that really, I mean, I guess we could say too, like in regards to like the demonic or angelic spirits, you have this Christian culture thing where it's like, okay, the angels are in the heavens and the demons are in hell. So I mean, you kind of see where fantasy gets its notions about the planes of existence. But again, this was if we think about it, this was a very flagrant attempt on the part of a mainstream religion to separate out these things, because they recognize that one of the ways to take power away from older spiritual beliefs was to get rid of the spirits, or to otherwise take those spirits and turn them into something that was part of Christian mythology. This is why you suddenly see a lot of saints that if you do some research, you discover that these saints actually have a lot of history in common with older spirits, and that they're really just older spirits that have been transformed. And I think too that this is why when you look at modern culture, you see how some spirits really work at it to stay alive and to stay present and be in reality with us. This is why I think, for example, like the Greek gods and the Norse gods are great examples of this, and they'll be willing to take on specific roles, if you will, with the character, with pop culture that may not be accurate to the original culture that they came from, but for all intents and purposes, it gives them something to work with. What I'm thinking of here, for example, is I'm playing God of War Ragnarok right now, and I think of the character of Odin in that game versus the history of or the experience of Odin. Odin in the game is not quite the same, but Odin in the game gives a portal, gives access to that older version of Odin. So Odin's going to work with that. And I think this is really important to recognize, so that when we think about awareness with spirits, what we're really looking at is how are we aware of the spirits, and what are the relationships that we're forming with them, and how do those relationships get formed? A lot of those relationships are very unconscious. They're unconscious biases and things that we don't even think about, but they play a role. And so it's quite fascinating to look at this and to recognize that really in a very deep sense, the spirits are much more present with us and aware and alive than we would recognize. We have put ourselves out there in a very distinct way that, nonetheless, we are biased because of our flesh. We are biased because we are spirits made flesh. And so we tend to think in very material terms, but I think that the spirits exist all around us all the time, and they're present, and they uh, they show up in different ways that we might not expect. So it's worthwhile to explore that relationship and understand the way that spirits show up and understand the way that we can interact and work with them. Can be a really powerful and potent form of experience and existence to consider. That the spirits are already around us, and that maybe when we're calling them formally, yes, we're what we're really doing is we're trying to get their awareness as opposed to getting them to show up. So, when you call for a daemon and you're like, yeah, I want that daemon to appear in a physical form. I mean, fair enough, but consider that what you're really trying to do is get the awareness of the daemon to focus on you, and that otherwise the daemon probably doesn't care that much about you. I mean, they may show up occasionally otherwise, but they're all performing very specific functions and roles, and just like we are. And our decision to call upon the spirits is really an example of calling upon this, calling on them to get their awareness and their attention. And if we apply that same awareness ourselves to the interaction, then we may have a different response, more respect, I would say. These are things that I think about when it comes to spirit work, and I think it's really relevant to the overall work. So hopefully you found this discussion interesting. Feel free to leave a comment, ask a question, whatever else. But and thank you for watching.